For 6 or so months, we were told that quiet diplomacy, to keep quiet, to trust that the government are doing what they're doing and everything's doing it behind closed doors. Didn't see any movement. And to be fair, the one thing that really triggered us going public was the 12-day war. At that point, they were due to be moved to Evin, which was subsequently bombed, and we didn't know where they were. Quite simply, the government had lost track of them. There was nobody on the ground to locate them. Luckily, we found out they hadn't been transferred. They were still in Karchak, but that period of time of not knowing was the worst of the whole 11 months that we've endured, because you are just constantly thinking the worst and you've got no way of clarifying it.
And what's the latest now? What are you hearing from your own government, but also anything from the Iranians at all?
I mean, from the government side, they've been to court now 3 times, both separately, different amount of times. Sometimes we're organised, others were whisked away. But we're being told, you know, there's this policy to kind of sit and wait and ride out the judicial process. And at the moment, they're in limbo. And that's how it feels, is that we've got 2 states that are just at stalemate, waiting for one to make a move.
And you've been able to talk to your mother, though. I mean, what have you been able to say to each other, and what's that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so she did a hunger strike. They both did a hunger strike recently in the last couple of weeks, and they were at their wits' end. You know, it was a big cry for help because they'd been promised to be able to see each other, but also to call family. And that hadn't happened. And the first call I got from my mum, spirits were very low. You could tell in her voice she was broken, very, very emotional. And she was on sort of day 5 of the hunger strike.
What was that like for you to hear that in your mother's voice?
To hear the person that means the most to you in the world suffering is the most horrific experience I can share, to be honest with you. She's my source of strength and inspiration, always has been since I was a kid, and you know, for once it was probably roles reversed. I felt like the parent at this point, right, in trying to keep calm and reassure and say, keep your strength, you know, and not telling her what to do because it's her own body. But I was very concerned that she wasn't eating and putting herself through more turmoil, right? Because she's already enduring enough.
So let's bring Richard in here, because obviously you've been through that, of course, as well. It reminds me so much of what you said to me over the years when Nazanin was incarcerated. Talking to her over the phone was a roller coaster for you as well. What do you say to Joe, I mean, to deal with the emotions of his ordeal, but also how he deals with the government's, because you've, of course, been advising him as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it brings back all sorts of memories. And I do remember, actually, sort of, in Nazanin's case, those early months where we don't know what's going on, we fear the worst. Sometimes our fears aren't, you know, it's worse than that, sometimes it's better than that. But I do remember the coldness of her on the phone when she was on hunger strike, and how distant, and feeling like, gosh, the powerlessness, what can we do to keep her going? And in terms of advice, I mean, there isn't one size fits all. Different, you know, our journey was our journey, Joe's journey will be his. But I know, for me, the more sunlight there was, the more the government justified or had to justify what on earth they were doing, because it looked to me for a long time like they weren't doing very much at all. And it was very opaque language about raising concerns and so on. And
you'd hope the British government and the Foreign Office have learnt a lot from your ordeal. Joe, do you think that's the case? Are they doing enough for you to help you with what's going on?
In all honesty, no. There's too many similarities to Richard and Nazanin's case, which are for the worse. You know, it is that passiveness to subdue what you're saying. And it's just taking accountability. I just don't feel like that's what they're doing. It's that they themselves are being very passive. You know, they've got 2 UK citizens that are accused of spying for the British state, but then not coming out and defending them and calling it for what it is. You know, that's, I think, the biggest thing for me, is that you need to stand up for your citizens, you know, and call it out. It's arbitrary detention. Quite clearly, it's almost hostage-taking at this point. Well, it is hostage-taking in my eyes.
I mean, the Foreign Office has said in the past that they don't want to give too much, and they don't want you to give too much currency to Lindsay and Craig and to Nazanin in the past, and raising too much of a hullabaloo about it actually makes the other side want to keep them for longer. Does that kind of convince you at all? Is there any justification?
Not at all, no. I mean, why wouldn't I want to raise the case, right? It's my mum and my stepdad, and I want them home desperately, so whatever I've got to do to make that happen, I'm going to. And the thing that really annoys me about what they say in that sense is that they're out there, if they're on charges of shoplifting, potentially that's understandable. Let's see the court of law, let's go through it if they've been caught of some wrongdoing. They haven't, and they've been accused of espionage, which is state-level political charges, right? They're not spies, it's quite simple.
And Richard, we've, as you referring to, the TV series is out now about your story and Nazanin's story. Do you think that will have an effect as well? Sometimes drama, more than journalism, actually does have an effect on government. And what's it been like for you to kind of, I guess, relive what you went through by watching it on screen?
Yeah, it's tough to revisit it. You know, we all like to remember the good times, and you know, it's tough, those early days. And anyone that's watched it, it's, you know, the last episode's nice, but the first episode's full on. And, you know, you can see me getting a bit triggered by some of the things that Joe's saying, but actually the drama, where it's our story, comes to it very strongly. So Nazanin, for example, didn't want to watch it. Like, I was the one that did the checks to check, you know, how accurate it was. Yeah, it does bring back some tough times. But you're right, the reason for doing it was hopefully as a warning, that people would learn the lessons, that this is what we went through. We went through this because the Iranian state is the way it is, and it does just pluck people from obscurity and use them. And we did it also because the British government, in our case, didn't step up, didn't protect, and you'd hope there would be, you know, a learning of the lessons. So do I think the government has learned the lessons? Well, you know, the government, when they came into power, made all these promises about they were going to establish a hostage envoy, they were going to put a right to constant protection in law so that we would have a fair treatment. Hasn't happened yet. And it does feel to me that I'm, you know, hearing too many echoes of our experience in the experience of Joe's family and others.
I remember, Richard, you saying to me, I said to you, how do you actually cope with this? Because you had extraordinary courage and great courage to be able to actually relive it watching the TV series. But you said you keep it up until sometimes you go home and then you kind of fall apart for a while.
So exactly that. I mean, as Joe said, I would cope in compartments. So I'd do this thing, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't like to watch things back. And that would work for a while. And then there are days where the wheels come off. And you just have to accept we're not, you know, we can all step into battle mode, but we're not built for battle forever. And to just, yeah, you know, be kind to yourself.
I'm sure that helps, Joe.
Massively. Yeah, it does. You know, and I think it's the right point, is because some days I feel like I'm winning the battle, right? And other days I feel like I'm being pummeled. You have to be present every day. I let myself get upset because they're natural emotions. I get angry, I get frustrated, I cry, I laugh sometimes because I look back at memories. I think all of those emotions are completely normal.
And what's the latest about what you know for both of them? They're not with each other, are they? They're being held separately. What do we know about their health, their welfare?
Yeah, I mean, so they did get to see each other on Sunday, but when they got to see each other, they're in a room which is, you know, it's barred cells, it's dirty sheets, there are cockroaches in the room. This isn't the Ritz or anything like that. So, you know, although it's nice they can be in each other's company, it's not where you'd want to choose to be in each other's company, right?
And I suppose the good news, though, is that you know that it has ended well. The story ended well for Richard, and hopefully it will for you as well. Does that keep you going?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the hope that keeps you going, right? Is that there is hopefully a happy ending, which I definitely think there is going to be a happy ending at some point. But I just, you know, I'm hoping we can learn lessons, and that it isn't 5-6 years down the line when that happy ending comes. I'll take it whenever it comes, but I'd like it to be a lot sooner than that.